Okay. Thanks for joining us. This is tonight's remote view. I'm trying to get back to sharing my nightly remote views with people. I had stopped for a while and now I feel like sharing my nightly meditations just seems right. Just seems like the right thing to do. All right. So I'm going to get into what you guys want to hear the most first. Or should I make you suffer with anticipation? I'm going to go one by one. Okay, the first thing I get when I go into my meditation is the instability right now with the President of Syria. So, as many of you know, the former President of Syria, Assad, fled, and then there became a new president in the revolution, Ahmed al Sharai. He is, I hope I pronounced that properly, he is the new president. He's been associated with terrorist organizations, loosely associated with Al Qaeda, etc. Not a nice guy. President Trump has asked him to go to war against Hezbollah. He has said he's not interested. Uh, Hezbollah, of course, is currently occupying Lebanon and using Lebanon to fire weapons. Of course, Hezbollah is a proxy army that is basically, for all intents and purposes, the Iranian army. And they are using Lebanon in order to fire upon Israel. And of course, the innocent people of Lebanon are stuck in the middle of this. So, Trump, in his infinite wisdom, decided to ask Ahmed al Sharai if he would be so kind as to enter into war with Hezbollah, which of course he refused. No, thank you. Nada, Nixville, not going to happen. So, what I see in the remote is that Ahmed al Sharai, I think that he's not going to be in power for much longer. Yeah, I think that I'm feeling like this presidency, his position, he should not get comfortable. I feel like that entire area is unstable. I think there are it's breaking into multiple factions and a civil war within the civil war. And I just don't see him as safe, and I don't see his presidency as stable. That situation could change, but the takeaway I got, it was the first hit I got in last night's remote views, was that Ahmed al-Sharai is not safe, and his situation is not stable, and it could change overnight. The second remote view is about the future of the country of Qatar. We've talked about Qatar in the past, how they have poured billions into secondary education, U.S. universities, influencing protest on college campuses. A lot of people are frightened about the fact that Qatar is investing so much money into the U.S. government. Our Department of Education is collapsing, and now we have this foreign government putting all this money into secondary education, taking hold of young people's minds, right? So these are the fears when you have foreign governments putting their money into U.S. education. But that is exactly what happens when you cut funding, right? So I felt like there was going to be an economic hit job that was taken on Qatar, and that's interesting because Qatar has one of the strongest economies. Their dinar is the strongest money in the world. I'm feeling a rift. I'm feeling a civil war is brewing, and I think we could see major changes in Qatar within the next 3 years, even less, 2 to 3 years. It just feels like something is brewing under the surface and that they're about to face an economic hitman. That people are going to go in and try and take them out because they are a threat to the Abraham Accords. We've talked about the Abraham Accords in the past and the fact that those countries that can get together and agree to trade within the Middle East will be making hundreds of billions of dollars. So if you have somebody in there that's causing fighting, funding terrorist organizations like Islamic Jihad or Hamas, or in the case of Iran, Hezbollah, right? Then that state sponsored terrorism, right? So that state that funded it becomes a threat to the Abraham Accords. And so what would happen is that those countries that are part of the Abraham Accords might have a vested interest in seeing the collapse of Qatar's uh, economy. If you know that there's trillions of dollars to be made off of a new trade route that's going to include India, United Arab Emirates, Europe, the United States, possibly Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Morocco, Jordan, Israel, Egypt, hundreds of billions of dollars in tourism, creating oasis zones. And you've got some country in the middle of this, this dream of this new transportation system, this new trade route. If you have somebody in the way interrupting that, the way that Qatar has, then they are not long for this world. And I'm going to go ahead and predict within 2.5 years we're seeing serious trouble in Qatar, and that's the reason. It looks to me like it was an economic hit. I think the third thing that I saw in the remote is that the war with Iran will resume because maybe they took a break because they're concerned about midterms. Maybe Trump is concerned that he's losing support, that down ballot races, people are not going to be voting Republican if they continue to have economic problems, if we continue to be in a war that has mixed support. So you get to a quick ceasefire and then you can go back to it after midterms. But this energy feels more that the war will resume sooner rather than later. And that's because Iran is another obstacle to the Abraham Accords, and any country that is an obstacle to this new trade route will be removed. And so that is why I think both Iran and Qatar will be removed. They will put in governments in those two countries that are going to support that trade route, um, that are going to be pro-Western and support that trade route. Um, the next thing that I wanted to talk about that I did a remote view on had to do with a growing anxiety I feel with Vladimir Putin. I feel that I am growing increasingly frightened and terrified that I'm surrounded, and this is making me desperate. And he keeps showing me in the remote views nuclear weapons, that he is going to use a nuclear weapon, that he is going to pull the trigger. And so this is a very scary time, and I think we need to wake up and realize that. And I don't think people are consciously aware of the mental state that Putin is in right now as he loses Crimea, as everything comes crashing down, as drones are firing on St. Petersburg and Moscow. We see the end in the near distance, and you wonder what is happening mentally to Putin as this entire thing comes crumbling down, and the realization that it's come crumbling down. What does that mean for him, his future leadership, etc.? If he's afraid of being captured, he could commit suicide, right? The guy who winds up in the bunker taking his own life, right? It could be a situation like that. He will be contained. This will end with him being contained, but I would pray right now because he's very unstable and he's threatening some. When I go into meditations about Putin, it just, he sounds really crazy. So just be aware of that. And so we could be seeing an escalation, crazy threats coming from Putin, and just be aware of that because that's what's coming up. All right, the last thing, I saved the last thing because it was the thing you wanted to probably hear about the most, and that has to do with when I go into energy over the White House. It feels to me like there are going to be a series of resignations and firings, that there is a circular firing squad that's about to hit in the White House. It feels to me when I go into the White House like I am seeing Trump firing people or wanting the resignations of multiple people. And that's because I feel like a lot of the problems I'm having, whether it's my sagging poll numbers, I've got to blame somebody. I've got to blame somebody. And I'm going to blame Kash Patel. I'm going to blame the people in the State Department. I'm going to blame my VP. I'm going to blame everybody but myself. And it feels to me, when I go into the energy of Trump, that it is time for him to begin blaming people for his sagging poll numbers, for the fact that the GOP is in trouble in the midterms, right? Somebody needs to be blamed for all of that. And so now is the time when we start to see Trump firing people one by one. So expect to see a lot of firings in the coming weeks. And the other thing that I always feel when I go into Trump's energy, the energy where we keep seeing Trump falling asleep, um, yeah, it feels to me like an exhaustion, almost like a flu. I just don't feel good, and I feel that I would want to get some blood work on him just because this influenza makes me think about things like anemia of chronic disease, right? And anemia of chronic disease is something that can come up in cancer patients, but it feels to me like a fatigue and an achy feeling, almost like a low grade flu, a low grade fever. That's how it feels when I go into his energy. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this quick remote view. If you need to see me to have a consultation, you can find all that information below this video. Be kind to all so that all will be kind to you too. God bless. Peace out. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.